Hello there guys and welcome to Mad Dog Minis. In this video I'm going to be making an ash waste vehicle inspired heavily by Alrethian's crafts and battles. So thanks very much mate for the inspiration if you're watching. Just using these pipe toys as axles, and I've inserted them into these wheels that I had kicking around. These are from Zinj Industries and somebody sent me the wrong size wheel and I just had these lying around, so I decided to use them. Now cutting a piece of foam board to act as a base for the chassis, just cutting that to the right size and shape. It's quite light and durable, so it's quite good for these kind of scratch builds. And now using this Multimac toy component, which has been kicking around in my bits box for ages. I'm just hot gluing that right down on the front here as a kind of engine block. Now I'm going to hot glue the axles to the base, and just going to reinforce that from underneath because no one's really going to see this, so a little bit of hot glue under there will go a long way. And I'm actually going to detail that engine block a little bit more now with these little Lego components, these kind of Lego taps. Anyone in my kind of era will probably recognise these things. But I've just got a few of those. I'm going to kind of glue those down either side, chop them off a little bit so they'll fit. And that just provides some nice detailing to the engine area. And so it's starting to look quite good there actually. So I'm using these same kind of pipe toy kit that I used for the axles. It comes with these kind of shapes, these square shapes, but I've kind of cut to shape a little bit, kind of cut bits out of them, and I'm going to kind of glue those into place with a little bit of hot glue. And this is going to effectively be the driving compartment, the cockpit, I guess, if you will. So I'm hot gluing one of those on here like that, and the other one's going to be sloped kind of windshield type setup. So a little bit of hot glue either side of the engine block there, and I'm going to lean that on an angle against the other one. And I do reinforce that with a little bit of super glue actually just in the join there, just to hold them together a bit more securely. So the general shape is coming together now. I found this old dozer blade from an ancient kind of Liman Russ tank kit in my bits box. This Multimac component has a little clip on the front of it, and that goes really well into there. So a bit of hot glue just holds that in place. So we've got a nice kind of dozer blade on the front now. I've just cut a little bit extra foam board, which I'm going to super glue down onto the existing chassis, and that's just going to raise the bed up a little bit at the back to allow me to make a kind of, like a kind of pickup area in the back there where I can put troops if I want to, or cargo or whatever. There's a little bit of hot glue here, and I'm just gluing on these components, and these are actually building spacers, which I had a load of these left over from some building work I had done on my house, so I just cut those to size and shape. And hot glue is definitely the way to go with attaching these things because it sets really quickly and holds them quite securely. So I'm going to put them on a bit of an angle, and that's just to provide lots of room in the back really. It's more of a practical decision, but it ends up looking really, I think, quite ramshackle and cool really. I think so the whole thing's kind of worked out quite nicely there, and from the back you can see the kind of the rough angle that I've used. And I just reinforced that with some further beads of hot glue just inside, because again this is all going to get covered up later, so a little bit of that goes a long way. Now using a bit of stitching mesh, once again direct inspiration from Alrethian's build. Go and check out his video, I'll put a link to it for the similar build that he did. And I'm now just raising up the bed at the back a little bit more, because I'm going to put a little bit more stitching mesh in here to kind of add a floor for the pickup kind of bed at the back. But I'm just using a bit of EPVC to kind of raise the height a little bit there, and then cut the stitching mesh to size and shape. I really do like stitching mesh. It's a lot of people hate it in the crafting community, but I love it. It's really easy to work with, and it just does exactly what you need it to do. So I'm a big fan. These are some components that I had left over from some las cannons. In fact, when I did my Land Raider conversion, I just glued them together and then sawed them down a little bit, and that just kind of got added on the back for some extra detail. I then reinforced the dozer blade on the front with a little bit of offcut of those building spacers. And that's again purely practical, just to kind of stop it kind of snapping off really. A little bit of stitching mesh on the side windows there, and I use these drinking straws, plastic drinking straws, as kind of these enormous exhaust pipes. So I just kind of cut two the same sort of size and shape, and then kind of glue them underneath. And I'm not too worried about the underneath because no one's really going to see that, so I can make a bit of a mess under here and it doesn't really matter. But I kind of put them on a bit of a diagonal and then use the kind of bendy part of the straw to kind of bend them up the sides. And I think these turned out really well actually. They look a bit oversized, but I think that's okay. We're talking about Warhammer 40,000 at the end of the day, and Necromunda, so everything's a little bit kind of too large, isn't it? So a little bit of super glue to reinforce on there. And then add a little front plate to the front of the engine block there, just on the front, little armoured plate. EPVC is what I use for that. Add in a little bit of more detail with some Lego components here, some little Lego clamps. They didn't actually glue on too well, but I think they'll hold on well enough once it's all dry. And that just adds a bit of detail to the front, really. So I'm a big fan of using little Lego pieces for my detailing, as you probably gathered if you've watched any of my other videos. If you don't like it, sorry, I use a lot of it. But yeah, I kind of really like the way that kind of brings extra detail into the build. So what am I doing now? Oh yes, on this part here, I'm just adding a little bit of lining to the windshield just to make it look a bit better. So I'm cutting really little thin strips of EPVC and just kind of like putting that around the windshield. I just think it's a better aesthetic, basically. It just makes it look a little bit more inset, a little bit more realistic. So now this fuel tank is made just of a little gaming piece, like a board game that I had. I think the game was Frustration, and I just kind of glued that on as like a makeshift kind of fuel tank on the back there. And I'm now making a kind of hood out of this kind of armoured plate, which is from a World War I tank kit I had left over. So I'm cutting it down to size and shape and gluing that on top. And it's got some nice rivet kind of detail on it, so it kind of adds a bit more detail for free, which is good. I then think about what I want on the hood, on the bonnet here, and I want some kind of intakes. So those bits that I sawed off the las cannon components, they're going to get stuck onto the top in a minute as kind of these big kind of vents or air intakes on the top of the hood. And that works out quite well as well, if I do say so myself. I do a little bit experimentation, as you can see here, with different components. I cut a lot of this kind of footage out because it gets a bit boring, but there was lots of toing and froing. But these are the things that I eventually use. And as I said, they come off the bottom of those las cannon components, and they look pretty cool. I then kind of add a little bit more detail to the interior, just a suggestion of a chair using this little Lego clamp on a bit of EPVC, and I just glue that into that area, and that's fine. It just adds a suggestion of detail without going too crazy. So here I'm actually kind of using a little bit more of those kind of pipe toys, just cutting them down a bit and just gluing them to the top of the kind of pickup section at the back. Just, I guess, like maybe like a rail or something to hold on to. I can imagine this thing being full of kind of like gangers in the back or something. Using a little bit of stitching mesh just to cover up a weird number on the side of one of those building wedges, and I have to do the same the other side with some more components in a minute. So just to make sure you hide the bits that don't look so good. But it's really starting to come together a little bit now. Just got a little bit of extra detailing to do, and then we'll kind of get to painting. So here I'm just cutting up a little bit of EPVC, just experimenting, and in the end I go for another Lego component and just glue that onto the bonnet there to kind of hide the front of the vents. Here I'm just kind of gluing on a little bit of extra detail onto the side of the truck. Again, it has a funny little number at the back, I think denotes the size of that building wedge thing that I use for the size of the pickup. So I just want to hide that. Again, little Lego vent does the trick there. And just a little bit of dab of hot glue here, and we're going to add a little machine gun to the front. It's Warhammer 40,000, it's Necromunda, nothing can be unarmed. So there we are, we've got our weaponry on the front there. And just a little bit of extra detailing on the side, this kind of old component I had kicking around in the bits box. Give it a good spray with black, and then a light dusting with lead belcher spray. That's all rattle can techniques. And then I get to some painting. Use a bit of Dark Angels green for the contrast paint just on some components, just to add a splash or a suggestion of colour. This isn't going to be brightly coloured, and I do kind of wipe some of that off to give a bit of a weathered look as well. So that kind of, the metal underneath the bare metal. Using a bit of Agrax Earthshade, give it a real good liberal coat all over, dirties it up a little bit, especially all over the silver components here. And that turns out really well. I decided to go for that rather than null oil because I wanted that dirty kind of effect. Really brings out a lot of the details on the stitching mesh, as you can see, and just makes it look a bit more worn and used, which is definitely what I want. This is a makeshift kind of vehicle. Using a bit of Troll Slayer orange now, watering that down really, really heavily. And that kind of like is, I don't know, a makeshift kind of rust wash. And I just kind of dab that on quite sparingly though. I don't go nuts with that, but you'll see what I mean in a sec. So just dabbing that here and there. Again, it just kind of adds another layer of grime and corrosion. But I'm quite selective with that because it is quite a powerful pigment in that paint. So although I've watered it down a lot, I don't go nuts with it. And then I use a little bit of Nuln Oil on the machine gun. I don't want the machine gun to look rusty, just used. So so a little bit of Nuln Oil does the trick there. Then using some Black Templar on the tyres, just to kind of dull them down a little bit and, you know, make it look like rubber, I guess. And after that, I just give it a really light dusting. Like a very, very light dusting with some kind of sand coloured spray. And so I'm kind of spraying it from like a foot or two away. And that produced a really nice weathered look. So I hope you enjoyed this little build. I had a bit of creative slump recently. And I just want to thank Alrethian's Crafts and Battles once again for just providing me with a little bit of inspiration, really. So I hope you like this, mate, if you're watching. And maybe it's worthy of joining in a battle or two on your amazing ash waste terrain board. So hope to see you all again soon in a future video, and stay tuned, guys. Thanks for all the support, and I really do appreciate all the comments and the feedback, and don't forget to let me know what you think. Cheers.